Do you know what my people call this past year? The Long Halloween.
Happy Halloween, Gothamites. My name is Brian Ward. Welcome to a very special episode of the Arkham Sessions. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond, Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing okay. This is a very special episode because we are covering one of your all-time, or is it fair to say your all-time favorite?
I'd say one of my favorite graphic novels. I don't know if it's the
end-all be-all.
It can't be because the art is not my favorite. The story's wonderful, but the art is not.
So you need both in order to make it your all-time favorite.
It's a graphic novel.
Got it. Okay, so we're talking about The Long Halloween, appropriate, because we are releasing this on Halloween. And I'd like to start out first, because I think we've discussed this very briefly in previous episodes, but I would like to ask you now to set us up. Why is The Long Halloween, written by Jeph Loeb with art by Tim Sale, one of your all-time favorite Batman graphic novels?
It's one of those books that handles the collection of villains in a really nice way. I know Jeph Loeb does this. The other writers do this. The ability to write in
as many villains as humanly possible.
Yeah, in a way that doesn't make it seem chaotic and haphazard and meaningless. Like there's a lot of important moments between Batman and each of the rogues. I'd say that this handles it nicely, just in terms of including them and attaching them to each of the holidays. So it's a gimmick. It's the killer's gimmick, but it also creates for the graphic novel a similar kind of expectation. You're going to be hit with an event each time there's a major holiday, and we'll get into the serial killer aspect of this, which is another reason I like this book. But that kind of like that whole package to me it's not gimmicky. It seems kind of exciting. It keeps you drawn in. And I think what's especially important about The Long Halloween is that the figures who are the most malicious and terrible are not the weirdos and freaks of Gotham City who have been the rogues and who have been the villains in most stories, and who are not necessarily innocent in this narrative, but serve a different purpose.
This is a story that follows primarily, it's a detective story that really dives into the organized crime of Gotham City. So it's not the standalone rogues and their henchmen. It is really what has corrupted Gotham for decades.
Right. There have been criminals that are insidious and have been controlling Gotham in various ways that make you realize that the villain is this kind of the undercurrent. The villain really are these mob families collectively.
And together they basically form, they are the origin for one of Gotham's greatest rogues in Two-Face.
Oh, yes. I didn't know if you meant Holiday, which is not one of Gotham's greatest rogues.
Definitely not one of Gotham's greatest rogues.
Yes, I would argue that Two-Face would emerge eventually in Harvey Dent. It doesn't take this catalyst for him to become Two-Face,
but he may not have two faces. he might not
have
be
many more.
He might not be the acidic the acid victim.
Yeah,
that he
in
is
this
now.
in this story, you're right. That is those forces create a huge villain, which is Two-Face, and the detective story is really grounded in the sense that there's that important following along. There's that string of clues that Batman is and Commissioner Gordon are following in order to make sense of all this. It's sort of like the discovery of a very bizarre, nonsense-like string of murders that they're trying to make sense of.
And it's one of the first time you mentioned Gordon and you mentioned Batman, and of course they are teaming up for this, but it's one of the first time, if not the first time, that I can certainly remember a story involving Harvey Dent as the DA in such a prominent role as a detective. He is one of the three detectives on this case with Batman and Gordon, and together they are a team. They're a pretty strong team. Well, now we're getting into to my thoughts on the
What
book,
are your
but
thoughts?
I don't like this book very much.
Oh, you don't like it? Oh no.
Well,
I'm sorry.
No, I mean I like the idea of it. For those who don't know, the premise, which Drea has sort of been touching on, is that there is a killer going around Gotham City called Holiday, who, yes, assassinates someone important, usually involved with the crime families, on each of the major holidays of the year. It goes through an entire calendar year. It begins on Halloween and it ends on Halloween, thus the long Halloween. But I do not like the inclusion of every rogue that's ever existed and the creation of a new one.
Why not?
Because I think it's just how the sausage is made. I think Jeph Loeb does this a lot. He does it too many times, in my opinion. My favorite is probably Hush, but he does it a ton. It's everyone who's ever been in Gotham City is in Hush. And he sort of does it here as well. And I feel like that there are certain characters that are given a spotlight, even for a short period of time, that just really wouldn't need to be there. I mean, there's in the book, and this is not in the movie. And by the way, we're covering the 2-part movie that was just released by DC and Warner Brothers, but we can discuss some of the differences. Like Jeph Loeb inserts the Riddler into the book really for no reason. Like one of the crime family members desperately wants clues as to who Holiday could be, and he employs the Riddler to do it. Why? I don't know. Maybe because he's good at puzzles, but it seems like an excuse to fit the Riddler in, and then you think the Riddler is going to die on April Fool's, but he's not. That's the April Fool's joke, and it would have been the Riddler, but it's not. And so it to me, it does become gimmicky. Mm-hmm. I've introduced the Riddler for really no reason. He didn't figure out who Holiday was. Holiday came after him, didn't kill him because we can't. Really the only sacrifices in the book are characters that Batman doesn't fight anyway. So there isn't a whole lot of...
You're saying the stakes really don't get that high.
Yeah, they never get high.
In the bigger picture.
Yeah. In the bigger picture, like none of the rogues are killed. One is created, but it's one that has always existed. It's just basically an origin story for Harvey Dent to Two-Face. So, yeah, fine. I think my problem with it too is that Batman is a horrible detective in this book.
That's why you were making faces when I said this is like a true detective serial killer story. It seems as though it disappoints you when we include Batman as a part of that trio, this detective trio.
It doesn't disappoint me. I just want Batman to be better at it. My issue with Batman in this book is that he basically accuses every member of the families and then some of being Holiday, and he's wrong every time. Now, to Batman's credit, Jeph Loeb, as a writer, doesn't drop any clues. There are no clues in the entire detective story, which is why when people talk about how they like the detective element of it, I think what they really like is the element of these three people talking together, trying to figure out like what they're going to do to lure Holiday out. But there are no clues genuinely left at any of the scenes, and Batman doesn't even figure it out in the end. I mean, no one really figures it out at the end of the book.
It does have an ending that, and we'll get into it, but the ending is a bit of a disappointment. It's a little bit of a head scratcher.
It's weird.
I'd say that I think I like the journey of the story, not so much the ending. And honestly, as I mentioned, I very much dislike who is it? Tim Sale.
Tim Sale. I'm with you there.
The characters are, it's so stylized, but some of the characters look the same, and I can't really. It's not distinguishing between
the
major
crime
characters.
family. Yeah, the crime family members all basically now. Granted, they are family. They are related.
Like Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne look very, very similar.
Yeah.
So I need a little bit more detail, and it's still. It's an epic story. I think it's one of the few that is really tight and contained. And here's what I think about this. This could be a pretty amazing live action film. And in fact, we see some elements of The Long Halloween in some of the Nolan films, like the burning of the money.
I agree.
Like some, and the fake death of now in the Long Halloween, I think it's the fake death. It's faking the death of
Alberto.
Of Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
And then in the Nolan film, of course, Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah.
There's some beats there in some of the Nolan films that it's obvious it comes from some of this.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I would hate to see this movie as a adaptation of this. But
like what we just saw.
Well, yes.
But you mean like a live action film?
Yeah. But
some are saying the Matt Reeves one is it has elements of a
sure
of a Long Halloween.
But I think that I think you're right. I think this book has a lot to pick and choose from to insert into other stories, like the burning of the money, the fake deaths of in the book it's Harvey Dent, but in the Dark Knight, it's Gordon. But and it's funny because you and I seem to disagree on this. Where you call it a tightly written story, I find it to be just all over the place. And that's because it's a bunch of vignettes. I mean, we don't really watch any days other than the holidays. And so this holiday killer's just going around, is succeeding for a full year. And so it's like, oh, we're on this holiday. Oh, and suddenly we're on this holiday. Oh, now we're on this holiday real quick. Oh, now we're on this holiday, and he has killed someone every single time. And by the way, he uses, and this is just really frustrating to me as well. He uses a pistol with a rubber baby bottle nipple on the barrel as if it would be an effective silencer. And Jeph Loeb even writes into the dialogue of the comic, cheap but effective. And I'd like to know how. I'd like to know how that works. That's someone who clearly doesn't understand the science, the science of how a suppressor works.
It would just burst through the.
It would destroy that nipple.
Burst through the rubber and make an even louder noise potentially.
I mean, it wouldn't be louder, but it's not going to suppress anything. That's not how a suppressor works.
How do silencers even work?
So now we're getting into science.
Yeah,
all right.
so
you've got a small barrel with the bullet in it, right? You've got the hammer pulls back, it hits the firing pin. The firing pin ignites gunpowder inside the bullet casing that creates an explosion of gas. That gas travels down the barrel, pushing the bullet out. When the bullet leaves the barrel, the gas expands into a loud concussive
So
sound.
it's the expelling of the gas that leads to the...
That's the big sound,
yeah.
big explosive sound. So what the suppressor does is it creates an extension to the barrel that is bigger than the barrel. It's like significantly more space at the end of the barrel. Mm-hmm. And as the gas goes through, it disperses amongst that bigger area and cools and slows down so that by the time it reaches the end of the suppressor barrel, it's now significantly quieter. There's all that explosiveness has just been dissipated inside this canister. And so it's a series of rings inside the suppressor.
That's why they're not. I mean, a baby bottle nipple is like just maybe
it's
an
just a little
inch.
piece of rubber. It's not suppressing anything. There's nothing that's going to happen into that gun. Now, if you're talking about the symbolism of why the baby bottle nipple is being used, okay. But what's interesting is it's a very loose connection in the book. Mm-hmm. And it's a far more drawn out, complicated connection in the movie that tries to explain it better. But, wow, we're like 15 minutes in.
Took you down a road.
Yeah, we need to. So we need to talk about this. We should say, so we've been saying that this is the origin story of Two-Face. Above all, this is the origin story of Two-Face. We are looking at Harvey Dent as a successful DA who has been making it his mission to take down the crime families of Gotham City. And those crime families seem to be at war with one another. On each major holiday, one of them from either side is being picked off. And they start to think it's one another, and they start going after each other. And then it becomes more apparent that it's not. Our first suspect right off the bat, I would say, is probably Alberto Falcone. Would you say? Because Alberto is the meek, not cut out for the crime family business son of Carmine, the leader of the Falcone family. And he is definitely like he's bullied by his father. He's looked down upon.
He also holds himself to a different standard. There's this scene between him and his father where he says that, clearly going to college and becoming educated and being different by choice it creates a chasm between him and most of the family members, but especially his father. There's this deliberate, intentional separation, as if he's saying, I really don't want to be involved in what you're doing. I'm not interested in taking up the mantle.
Unlike his sister, Sophia, who desperately wants to take up the mantle. She wants to be the next godfather of the family.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It would make sense for him to pick off from both sides the mobsters with the intention of dismantling this legacy. The potential that this could be ongoing and the potential that he would be any part of it in the future.
Yeah. This movie in particular, so I did say that Batman is a bad detective. What I do enjoy about this movie is they own up to it. They make it sort of an early detective story, and there is this great line of dialogue, and I wanted to pull it for you, so we should take a listen.
I thought this would be about sweeping criminals off the street, maybe scaring them straight. I never thought the Batman was going to have to be a detective. A good one.
That voice, by the way, is one we have not heard play Batman before. That's Jensen Ackles from Supernatural, who I actually very much enjoyed as Batman in this
He's quite good.
in these two movies. But that's him admitting, I didn't realize detective work was going to be part of my job here. I thought I was just going to be brutalizing criminals and that they would be terrified of me, and I would clean up the streets that way.
Yeah, just by scaring people. How?
I mean, really, that's what
Yeah,
he swore to do, right? In the first Batman, he said, I need to become, they're a superstitious, cowardly lot. I need to become a symbol that terrifies them. And I've always said, it ain't working. And apparently here's Batman acknowledging it's not working. Turns out I got to actually put my mind into it. I got to become a detective.
And I suppose that's how I've always characterized him. So while I appreciate that line, I think that's the honesty there.
Yeah. I appreciate that they're creating an origin story, not just for a villain, but also for a hero. They're saying, oh, we're going to have to actually create a character. We're going to show how he became the world's greatest detective.
I mean, it could, if I think about it a little bit, it says quite a bit about him, right? I was just hoping to
beat people
F
up.
things up. Like
Yeah.
I was in it for the feels.
Yeah.
Like I was in it for
to
for
take out
the
his
passion.
aggression and
yeah. Like now that I have a chance to let that marinate a little bit, it's the hope and the appeal of the punch, right? I just want to intimidate. I want to be an aggressor. I want to, get an outlet for this rage and this passion, and I want it to be meaningful. And he's realizing, he has to use his brain. He has to be tactful and planful. And the GCPD is so terrible, or at least maybe incompetent at this point, that he realizes he needs to participate fully in this investigatory element. I think it's interesting. He wants to just show up and scare. He wants to show up at the end or throughout, right?
Yeah.
And let the others get out their plastic baggies.
It's
like
and tweezers
he doesn't
yeah.
want to mess with that. And might say a lot about people who go into various types of work where, I think a lot about serial killers, as you know.
Yeah, you think about them way too much.
And I suppose there are professionals, there are forensic psychiatrists, there are professionals like me, there are other folks who work in intervention and treatment, rehabilitation. We're all over the place. But I think it's true that some of us, and this is probably true for other aspects of disciplines that work in these fields, that there are parts of this that are enjoyable, and then there are parts that are more, I suppose like the mundane or the tedious, the tedium, right? So I can understand why he said that.
Sure. Let's talk about the trio a little bit. This group of detectives. You've got the literal detective, Jim Gordon. You've got Batman, and you've got Harvey Dent. And what I really enjoy about this triad is that it really shows us, the viewer, or the reader, because it's the same in the book. It's almost this, I don't want to use the word desperation, but it's this need to solve the puzzle and to put these people behind bars, regardless of morality, regardless of...
Or motivation?
Well, no. The three of them are willing to blur the edges of the law. Gordon less than Batman and Harvey. But what I like is that in the book especially, Batman pushes Harvey to burn the money. They find a stash of cash similar to what you were talking about in Dark Knight. They find a stash of cash that belongs to the families, and Selina Kyle is the one who tells them where it is. Now in the book, she sort of then F's off.
She's not there.
She's not there. In the movie, she suggests that they burn the money. taking it away from the family and hurting them more than simply removing it from the warehouse could possibly do. In the book, Batman is the one who's like, let's light this up. And all of this would be illegal. This is evidence.
It's a warehouse of laundered money.
Yeah, I mean, why would you do this except only to hurt the crime family? It's not going to really help your case. So what they're trying to do is basically lure this family out to do desperate things that they can then catch them, committing crimes and whatever's. So Batman in the book is really pushing Harvey toward this blurred edge, dark side. You're not the White Knight that maybe the Dark Knight movie suggests you could be. And in the movie version, he does this by flipping the coin to Harvey and saying, maybe we flip a coin to decide whether we destroy the money or take it. And Harvey flips the coin, and of course we know that it's the two-headed coin. Batman provided the two-headed coin to Harvey. That has become his great symbol. So yeah, Batman is actively pushing Harvey toward this darker side, this not necessarily maintaining his level of purity within the corrupt Gotham system.
This is there's 1,000 things we could say. This could be a projection. Like, I would do it. Would he do it? He's a man of the law. He's somebody I respect. He's somebody that I would, I wonder if it's a bit of a projection. Would he do it? And if I just edged him on a little bit, would he do it? This might say more about Batman than it is an analysis of Harvey Dent, right?
That's what I mean. Yeah. Is about Batman. It's like Batman is the one who is actively starting to create a character that he is later going to spend a lifetime fighting.
I don't think he's deliberate and wants to create an enemy.
No.
I think it's along the lines of like, I sit in this gray area and I want to pull other people into this darkness with me.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting.
But it bites him in the butt.
It does bite him in the butt, literally. But what's interesting is I keep going back to Nolan. I'm jumping around, but in the Nolan films, it's the Joker saying this. Mm-hmm. And it's actually Batman telling Harvey Dent, resist the urge to be impulsive and to give in to the recklessness that is like, that you're thirsty for because there's chaos everywhere. Like, find order, find the rules, find something meaningful in this. That's sort of that's very opposite than what we're seeing in this film. I'd say that this is sort of his, if we're to say this is the beginning, this is more about his first phase of being Batman. It's a search for validation and belonging. It's not really about, I don't think it has a lot to do with even finding the serial killer.
No, probably not. Let's talk about Harvey then. Harvey starts out as this guy who's extremely idealistic. He has a family. He's got a wife that he seems to love very much. She is, I would say, just based on body language and she seems to be leaning toward depression to me. I'm not the professional here, but she's lost her husband to these crime families. He spends every waking moment doing everything he can to bring them down. Meanwhile, she wants to have her husband. He talks about the desire to have a family. she suggests in the movie, she says, I can't. I don't know what that means because he keeps insisting, no, we can. So I don't know if it's literally that she can't. But he's like, no, we'll find the time.
Yeah, it's open to interpretation, but my understanding of that is that that they can't have a biological kid.
There's a history there,
or that they've certainly there's a trauma history that they've had losses and traumas related to starting a family, and so I'd say that her response of "I can't" could be medical, but it could also be psychological.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah. What does that do? What does that do to a family when you come home at night and you're only half there? I mean, we see that he comes home and they're snuggling together, but then he gets a call to leave and he's got to go. So he goes. Similar to Batman, similar to Gordon, the DA leaves. And he's just not present. What does this do to these people? To Gilda, his wife. What does this do to this family?
Well, we don't know if there had been some conflicts before he was promoted into this job or started to do this this kind of work, but it just exacerbates the feelings of separation and alienation that she has. She doesn't really have a lot of support, so she probably feels very lonely, and we don't see any other meaningful attachments, friendships, family members. He may be the only support person. Mm-hmm. He may be the only one in her support system, which is problematic because she's experienced loss and trauma, and what she needs is social support. So I'd say this is a very insecure attachment, and I'd say that it's all the ingredients for separation. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know that the two of them
belong together.
And I appreciate that you say he's trying. You could see he's making attempts, but his job keeps pulling him from her.
Yeah. What do you want to say about Harvey? As someone who is very familiar with Two-Face and Harvey Dent, in fact, you have gone on record as stating that the image of watching Two-Face emerge from the hospital room in Batman the Animated Series is the image that got you so interested in Batman and comics and these characters and psychology. What do you want to say about Harvey Dent in this story and in this movie?
I don't know. It's the horror of it. It's his story is really interesting. He's, in most incarnations, a very successful, high-level figure, very proud of himself. He's very well-intentioned. He has a pure vision. Mm-hmm. And then things go wrong, and there's a tragedy to that. But I'd say the same for many other of the rogues that I care about. His story is a huge adjustment, right? It's a lesson about having to reckon with the horrors that happen to you.
Yeah.
And with him, it's a visible scarring. There's an inability to escape from your trauma. You have to face it. It's such an allegory, right? You have to face it.
We should talk about the scarring a little bit because they set it up again. You're
tricked
talking.
Us.
You're talking about.
He comes out of the hospital room, and I had forgotten about the book because in the book, acid is thrown in his face in the courtroom. It's a very unforgettable thing.
Yeah, which they set up in The Dark Knight. There's a moment where he's in a courtroom and suddenly this character who's on the stand takes out a gun and says, "This is for Carmine Falcone," or whatever. And in a twist, Harvey disarms him, punches him in the face, and says, if you want to kill me, you got to come with something better than that. And he gets his scarring in a completely different, more horrific way. In The Long Halloween, he gets it because he is taken in by this character who says that he's ready to make amends with the law. He's ready to, if you can give me immunity, I will testify for you and I will take care of this. You will put those that you want behind bars forever. And in this moment, on the stand, Sal says, I don't know what you're talking about. Nope, didn't happen. I'm here to testify. Angering Harvey, and then Sal pulls out the acid and throws it into Harvey's face, creating Two-Face. This is, by the way, after a previous assassination attempt blowing up his home, in which he ended up in the hospital.
And you'd think that's where
he got the scars, but he didn't.
He doesn't get the scar. It's
Which,
like,
by
when
the
is
way,
he going to get his scars?
And in the book, it's Gilda that ends up in the
Right.
hospital, not Harvey. But and in the book, he uses that explosion as a way to fake his own death to lure out Holiday. But
the other feature about Harvey Dent that I appreciate is very psychological. It's that duality, the second voice, the inner critic, the villain that I think all of us have, pointing out our mistakes and errors and feeling paranoid and worrying about our well-being and our futures and our relationships, sort of the voice that often can bother us or haunt us, or
Big Bad Harv.
Yeah, I mean that's another allegory that's important, because with Harvey, of course, it's extreme. It becomes another character. It becomes another personality.
Yeah.
Whereas with most of us, this is more of an inner critic or a self-doubt. And with Harvey, I noticed in the animated film, and I don't think this is in the book, his Two-Face voice emerges before the accident.
yeah,
So before he even has his disfigurement, a voice is, emanating or being heard from within his mind. And it's directive.
yeah.
It is instructional. It's telling him to do things. And I'd say if a patient told me that they were experiencing that, right away you'd think this is an auditory hallucination.
Schizophrenia.
Yeah, because they're command hallucinations. They're telling you what to do. Maybe not necessarily schizophrenia, but certainly a hallucination that needs to be explored. Command hallucinations are voices that tell you to do things. And now there's a fallacy that serial killers all have command hallucinations. Some voice that's created in their pathology, in their psychopathology, in their mind.
Or genuinely comes from the neighbor's dog.
Well, we'll get into that.
Oh, okay.
I keep saying we're going to get into things that we may not. But that idea that serial killers kill people because a type of paranoia or schizophrenia or some kind of thought disorder is being experienced by them, and these voices are urging them to do these horrible things. Now, the reality is that that's not true for the majority of serial killers. Most serial killers do not have a command hallucination. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is that the movie does a nice job of kind of hinting that he might have this severe mental illness, and it kind of picks at our own biases. It lifts up our assumptions that, if he's hearing voices, he's a killer.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the way that I think it makes us wonder if he's the holiday killer.
And they're also playing with the unfortunate notion that Harvey might have multiple personalities, because at one point the voice even basically says, okay, step aside. I'm taking over now.
Yeah.
And at one point, he basically even says to Batman, Harvey Dent's gone. Harvey Dent's dead. It's just Two-Face now. He's not even of two minds on any situation anymore. It's just, nope, Two-Face is now taken over. So it lends fuel to that fire that Harvey Dent and Two-Face are two different identities, which I've never subscribed to.
Yeah.
But yeah. I do want to ask you a question about what you just said, though.
Sure.
You talk about potential disorders. You talk about schizophrenia. You talk about these hallucinations, and I'm wondering if this is all naturally occurring. Do you have to have one of these disorders in order to start hearing these things, or could the stress of being the DA in this moment? You have spent your entire career trying to take down these crime families that have infested Gotham City. One of your key witnesses was killed earlier. Another person comes in and says they're willing to do it. And now that they're on the stand, they have made a fool of you. And you are now, I mean, you're talking about an elected position. You are now being made a fool of. Could the stress of his job, of his family life, of this moment that he is in develop something that wasn't established with it, like determined? I don't want to. I guess what I'm asking is, could an event externally create these things, or is it something where, oh no, he clearly had sort of a predisposition for hallucinations?
It's usually a combination. It's usually a diathesis, a predisposition, an inherent biological, neurochemical, genetic predisposition, one that's very complex, that's hit hard with exactly what you're saying, multiple traumatic and stressful events that then put exhaustion to the system. It could, in many ways, be temporary. Mm-hmm. So when we think about depressive disorders or anxiety disorders or even traumatic stress disorders that co-occur with hallucinations or some kind of like bizarre psychotic symptoms, what will help you understand how the two go together is learning what happens when the depression remits. So what happens to Harvey when the stress of his job is diminished? What happens to him? Does he still hear voices?
Yeah.
When he's not in these depressive episodes or under duress? That would be important information to have, and we don't really have that. But you mentioned stress, and I do want to say that there's a ton of research that shows that people who develop schizophrenia can pinpoint extreme stress in their upbringing. It's a fallacy to say that it's like maybe a parent or stern, a stern caregiver. It's not necessarily that, but that can. It's not the only cause, but it is one factor that plays a part.
Is it possible that someone with a predisposition for schizophrenia wouldn't develop it otherwise? Or are you talking about something that like, oh, this runs in the family? I guess what I'm asking is, if you were going to get it, were you always going to get it? Or could a traumatic moment have triggered it?
We don't know.
Okay.
And I think if we knew, we'd have very different outcomes. It's similar to the discussion we had about equifinality. Many people believe that severe psychotic disorders like schizophrenia are almost inevitable. And let me just...
And it's a luck of the draw sort of thing. I don't want to call it luck of the draw, but it's
it's
the
like
unluck of the draw.
Do you somebody who experiences a string of stressful events, may not come out the other side very healthy, but that's true for all of us, right?
Yeah.
But let me also add to not be so final about this, but let me add that what could be different is the severity of the disorder. So you may have elements of a psychotic disorder that come up that allow you to understand that you might have a predisposition, or that you might have people in your family who have schizophrenia. But that lighter version, that less severe version, is always a possibility, I think, for most people.
So it's similar to any other, like you've mentioned on several occasions, and it's important to point out that having borderline personality disorder does not make you a bad person, but if you leave it untreated or treated improperly or poorly, that is what could lead it down a worse path. So in the same way, if you get on something like schizophrenia or something with auditory hallucinations and you treat it properly and you treat it well, you could have a much less severe version of this. And if you keep your stress levels down, and if you eat well, and if you do, whatever it takes.
Yeah. And notice that we're naming so many different factors to improve that quality of life. And I don't want to pick on schizophrenia as like, oh, this is the only disorder that applies to the factors and the ingredients that we're talking about. But going back to Harvey Dent, I've always looked at Harvey Dent as a character who is much more symbolic of the dual ways of thinking. So in other words, I don't really ever see this as a character that has schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
Which is now dissociative identity disorder. But I see him more as somebody who is struggling with the impulses and tendencies that are harmful to him and to others, which is common for a lot of different disorders. I almost see him as, in a way, and I'm probably the only one who thinks this, Harvey Dent is representing mental illness generally, not a particular kind, but just this struggle to be yourself, to integrate all the different parts of you, and even the parts that are ugly and disfigured. And how do you integrate all of that to be a whole person? He's a very, very relatable person. Now, in this film, it's very similar to the animated series. He's hearing the voice. He has this traumatic accident. He then has to adjust to this huge turning point, this huge event in his life. And, there's also his relationship that's pretty bad right now. And I see this as I almost see this as his own sort of bad self, if I can use a simple term, his bad self being preemptive. Like, it's really not the explosion. It's not having acid thrown in your face, although that is scary as F. None of those things really are the catalyst. He had these inner demons. He's already in a dark place.
The acid seems to have triggered a response, which is simply, I give up. I'm not going to hold these things back. I'm just going to let the coin decide. I'm not going to stress myself out by making this decision to be good or bad in this moment. I'm just going to let the coin decide for me. So yeah, you see him struggling and struggling and struggling until he just gives up the struggle. And that doesn't mean he's always going to succumb to the bad. He's just not going to worry about the decision he's going to make. He's going to let the coin do it for him, which now is scarred as well. So there are genuinely two sides of the coin.
And there's some satisfaction in that, right? Like, leave it up to some other, it's not, the locus of control is not me. Leave it up to some other agent, some other thing.
Yeah.
And I no longer will have to, like you said, I don't have to worry about participating in that. But I think it's also a folding into a willingness to be the villain. Like, now I can be fully, authentically me, and I'm going to be what people see.
Yeah.
So that's, he's a huge part of the story.
Yeah. I mean, it's more about him than it is about anyone else. It's not really about.
So do you think that Batman, after this happened, and now this is not indicated in the film, but do you think Batman is like secretly, yes, like, haha.
I've always wanted to punch that guy in the face.
Another one. Like what? Because you said he sort of wanted to push him.
No, I don't mean push him. No, I didn't say he wanted to. I'm saying he did. So I think he wanted another vigilante to some degree. I think he always thought of Harvey Dent as being probably the ally most like himself, but in a better position to get things done politically and by the law, but willing to blur those edges and to do things like arson if it meant, if the ends justified the means. Whereas Batman is strictly a vigilante. He is just going to punch you in the face, and he could get away with it because he doesn't have the political or.
So for him, the end does justify the means.
Except now that ally is gone. He does not have that DA anymore.
Right.
It's now just we saw that when it was the three of them together, they were pretty good. But now one of them is taken away. You've now taken one of the legs off the tripod, and it's just not as good. And we see just in future stories, Batman and Gordon can't do it by themselves. They needed Harvey Dent, or they needed someone who could carry on the beacon of hope through Gotham City, and that was Harvey Dent.
Right.
And so whether he, and I think we see Batman push Harvey enough times toward that center line throughout this story that by the time he gets the acid splash, Harvey is too far in that center lane to care anymore about going back to the right side, And so I think Batman inadvertently created another great foe for himself.
Well, let's get back to the serial killing, please.
Do we need to?
We do. A highlight of both the film and the book is the consultation with Calendar Man. And so here's
the most obvious choice for who would have been this killer, because it's literally his MO.
But this is kind of what's funny, and to give you some credit around your statement that this isn't exactly the most this isn't exactly the best story. There is already a Gotham villain who kills on holidays,
who does this exact thing,
and his name is Calendar Man,
which instantly says, red herring, this can't possibly be him, because why would he just continue his own MO but with a different name?
But it gives us this great Manhunter scene where Batman is interrogating Calendar Man at Arkham.
I actually pulled some of this audio.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
All right.
The district attorney is a suspect? Well, of course. Intelligent, calculating, with a mission to take down Carmine Falcone. It all fits.
Harvey Dent is not a killer.
Unless he's leading a double life. Like your caped crusader here.
Why did you ask for me?
So you could see for yourself.
I don't have time for your crazy.
Oh, you really don't. There's lots of crazy out there these days. And just when you thought you'd cleaned it all up. Oh, what a joke.
It's what we love. It's getting into the mind of a serial killer who has been caught.
Yeah.
And what are the motives? Why the calling cards?
Yeah.
Why the need to get attention? Why the trail? Do they want to get caught? All those juicy, saucy questions get to be asked. And of course, Calendar Man in the film is a bit, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, as we could hear.
You can tell that he also is enticed by this conversation. And
well, you don't get the impression that he's ever visited all that often. Like, he's just probably not one of those characters that is visited. And, Batman's never going to come to him to ask him questions. Like, this is his
he's excited.
This is his big shot.
He's actually doing something. And I don't know that Batman learns a lot from this guy, but it does, it gives us that element of creepiness that we're looking for.
It's that Hannibal Lecter moment.
Yes,
yeah.
For sure. We don't yet know who the killer is. We're wondering what are the motives, and we're also intrigued by the calling cards, which I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. Calling cards, as you know, are very common techniques. These are the signatures that serial killers use to let the public and to let the police know that it was them.
I'm smarter than you. You can't catch me. And I'm just going to keep leaving these. I'm going to send these letters to the newspaper.
Yes,
and
from the Zodiac Killer to Son of Sam to the BTK to even there are some serial killers that will use the signature on the bodies. Mm-hmm. There's some serial killers like there was a serial killer that would send letters. I believe actually BTK and Zodiac were sending letters to the police directly.
Correct.
With clues.
Well, no, Zodiac was sending them to the Chronicle, to the San Francisco newspaper. BTK was sending them directly.
And those were cryptic. I mean, with Zodiac, it was incredibly cryptic, but those would be clues that would acknowledge it's two things. It's taking credit, it's the kind, and there's multiple types of serial killers, but with Holiday, it's, I want credit for this. Yeah. And then with some of the signatures that are at the scene of the crime on the bodies. So some of the types of body what happens to the remains, the disfigurement, the types of things that might happen to the victims, unfortunately, have a pattern. Yeah. And that also could send a message to police about the serial killer.
With Holiday, though, it doesn't appear to be a message to the police so much as it appears to be a message to the crime families.
Sure.
That I can get to any of you at any time, and I am choosing these days and these moments to do it.
Isn't he leaving the weapon?
Yeah, he's always leaving the gun with the intact baby bottle nipple on the barrel.
I know we've talked about it, but wouldn't the bullet send that nipple?
It would destroy the nipple.
Yeah, you wouldn't still see it on the...
No, it would be gone. It'd be gone. It'd be gone. Okay. There'd be no... It wouldn't just be a small hole at the tip of it. No. The
other thing that a lot of us struggle with serial killers is wondering, is it the act of killing that is satisfying, or is it this bigger game? And so with Holiday, we also ask the same question, and we're approaching the idea that it's a bigger game, that this person is not like a Dahmer or like a BTK, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody who is really spending some time with their victims and have a complete lack of remorse about other people. Mm-hmm. This serial killer is very planful. This is not impulsive. These aren't impulsive killings. Yeah. This is planful, scheduled, literally scheduled.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get any more planned than these killings.
The victims are people that are mapped out and strategically selected. This is about the aftermath. This is about hurting the mob family.
Mm-hmm.
This is about dismantling the crime system in Gotham. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's really, of course, the murder is questionable in terms of morality, but the intent here is to stir things up.
All right, let's talk about the intent. Let's talk about the end of this story, because I feel like we're getting there. How do you want to do this, Drea? Do you want to talk about how it was in the book and then how it was done in the movie, or do you want to do vice versa, or do you want, because there is a difference, or do you want to?
Let's start with the film.
Okay, all right. So here's the deal. It's believed that Harvey Dent might be the killer because he lets a couple people out of Arkham and then kills them, is caught, and it's believed, okay, we've got him, we've got our killer, but that doesn't make sense. It couldn't have possibly been Harvey this whole time. He was helping us, he was, whatever. It then turns out that really the killer for the majority of the film was Gilda. And Gilda had an entire motive behind all of this that is completely new to the movie, which is that she and Alberto Falcone had at one time been romantically involved and had been, she had been pregnant with his child. The two of them were going to be happy together. Carmine found out, insisted that it be aborted, that the pregnancy be terminated, insisted that Alberto leave her, and she then moved to Gotham City, married Harvey Dent. It's unclear as to whether that was all just motivational, if that was all just motivated by her need to get back at the Falcone family, or if she genuinely fell in love with Harvey and he was but ultimately he was the closest thing she had to an ally in taking this family down. So she fell in love with him and they got married. But that is basically the reason that the baby bottle nipple is on the tip of the gun. It's a tip of the hat to, I had a child, I no longer have the child. Alberto was killed by Holiday in the movie, by the way.
Yeah. So is that her? Is that Gilda?
It's
in the
presumably
hat and the coat?
It's presumably Gilda, because Alberto was weak and left, like didn't fight for her, didn't.
Got it. Okay.
And it's partly his fault that all of this happened and all that. So she has taken it upon herself to become the killer. Harvey has also done a couple of the killings as Holiday. So there are two Holiday killers.
This is different than the book. But,
Correct.
But to summarize what you're saying, Gilda performed most of the killings until the end when Harvey Dent became Two-Face, and then he killed a couple of folks.
On a holiday, which made him partly Holiday.
Okay.
Batman supposedly figured it out based on like who went to college where, and what like
That was weird.
Like it was a weird connection, but it was like, okay, I have figured out that Gilda was the real killer, and Batman shows up at her house as she's burning the evidence, and she explains all of this to Batman. And the weird thing is Batman just goes, "Do you promise you're done? Is it over?" And she's like, "Yep." And he's like, "Okay, bye." He lets it go.
He doesn't bring her to Arkham.
He doesn't, nothing happens to
Yeah.
her. It's just a promise that Holiday is done killing. And it's wackadoodle.
Yeah, it's a little weird. In the book, we do have that.
It's even more wackadoodle.
It's actually, yeah, it's weird. Would you say that the film fixed?
No.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't say either one has a satisfying ending, because in the book there are 3 potentially Holiday killers. Gilda started them because her belief was, if the 2 crime families are wiping each other out, it gives me and Harvey an opportunity to have a family.
Yeah, it's like, let me wipe out the enemy. Let me take care of let me wipe out the source of
or at least start
what's taking him away from me.
Yeah, start the gang wars so that the
Yikes.
gangs kill each
Yeah, that
other,
didn't
and then
work.
Harvey and I could be happy together. It's such a weird motivation, and it's just a weird move to make.
But
And
in the
then-
book, Alberto is not. He's killed. It's a fake death.
so here's the thing: so Alberto is killed, but it's a fake death, and then he takes over as Holiday and is responsible for a number, like most of the other killings. She started it. He basically finishes it until Carmine and Vernon at the end. That's all done by Harvey. And Harvey says, so Alberto confesses to the killings. He basically says, yeah, I'm it. I'm Holiday. Here's why. Yeah. And Batman and Gordon feel good about themselves. Harvey, though, says there are 2 Holidays, and he puts his hands out and he's like, you got to cuff me. Like, this is his Harvey Dent side saying, no, I've done the killing, but now I got to do the time. This is me still being 2 people. And they take Harvey in because technically he was the second Holiday killer, because he killed Carmine and Vernon on Halloween a year later. And then we cut back to Harvey's house, and Gilda is burning all the evidence, including a gun and the hat and all that. And we realize she was the original Holiday killer. None of it makes sense. There isn't a single clue.
In that monologue, she says that Harvey also helped out.
Yeah.
Which is like,
And Batman doesn't figure that out. She's
No.
not monologuing
No, he's not there.
to Batman. Batman never figured it out. He's a horrible detective.
And because she's the one whose storytelling is like, at least in the book, you don't know the veracity. You really can't really are unsure about the veracity of her comments.
Yeah.
So this is why I say the ride is fun, but when you get to the end, it's kind of unfulfilling. It's very dissatisfying.
And I have to give Batman credit. I've been saying he's a horrible detective. That's not true. There isn't a single clue over the course of the book that leads you to any of these people. Like there are no clues that lead you to Gilda, period. There are lots of red herrings. There's like, oh, that could be Harvey. Mm-hmm. Oh, that could be Alberto. But really that's more about motivation. There are no clues that send you to any of the 3 people. Mm-hmm. And in the movie, Batman figures it out through the whole college connection. And it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, like Alberto and Gilda went to the same college.
Like they fell in love in college. Like, oh, you're the one who went to that college. You must be the person he fell in love. You must be Holiday. Are you done? Are you done now? Can I leave? Is everything cool? It was bizarre. I didn't like it.
Well, what I'll say about serial killers is that when you ask them if they're done,
They usually say
they
no.
usually aren't. There is an attachment to it. It's very much a part of almost their personality. And so I think it's a bad practice to let somebody go.
And why would she be done? Why would she be done now? If you're talking about the motive of like, well, I only specifically wanted to kill these people and now I'm done. Your husband is now gone. and has now become a criminal himself, couldn't you then say, well, now I need to kill the rest of the crime families, or now I need to kill Batman, or now I need to kill, like, couldn't she become a rogue? Is there any reason why Holiday shouldn't
I'm
pop
actually,
up again?
And I haven't read every comic, but I'm surprised that
Gilda's not just become, yeah.
Like, what would her, like, so technically Gilda's Holiday, what would her rogue outfit be? Like a TGI Fridays, like just all the,
Yes,
all
she's
of
just
the
got all the
holiday,
flair.
like the pumpkin and the Christmas tree. And
I like how you jumped to she's going to be dressed in a TGI Fridays
she'll have,
outfit.
well, you can't just choose one holiday.
It's true. I mean, you could be a different costume per holiday.
How does, I'm looking up Calendar Man. Even in the video game, he's in his Arkham suit.
It's
But,
because he's not an interesting character.
No, but in the comics, he does have a date on his almost like a cape that has a month and a day on it, and then a sash, a white sash that has various numbers.
Yeah.
Presumably from a calendar, and then white pants.
Yeah. He's not an interesting character. Yeah. Look, I've said it before. I think when we covered Hush, I'll never forgive Jeph Loeb for botching the identity of Hush. To his credit, I am not an editor at DC. I'm not one of the publishers. I do not know what they told him he could and couldn't do, but it was brilliant to have Hush revealed as Jason Todd. This was pre-Red Hood, if you remember, pre-Red Hood. So it would have been brilliant to have him be like, "You left me."
That's why that part works so well.
But then it just is instantly wiped away when you find out it's Clayface instead.
Which also works.
But it's not Hush. Like, he was like, that moment he was Clayface, or Clayface was Hush kind of, but was not ultimately Hush at the end. So I feel like Jeph Loeb never fully knows how to finish his stories, and it's exemplified here with The Long Halloween.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
What'd you think of the performances?
Really good. We
Josh
paused.
Duhamel as Harvey Dent.
Wonderful. With the Joker, you and I paused and wondered, gosh, this person sounds so much like Mark Hamill, but isn't Mark Hamill.
Yeah, I kept thinking it sounds so much like him, but not quite like him. And then it led me to believe it's got to be Troy Baker, because he did the video game, the Arkham Origins video game that Mark Hamill didn't do, and sounded enough like Mark Hamill that you could get away with Troy Baker. Played my very first game of D&D ever with Troy.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So yeah, that's our take on.
And Julie Nathanson as Gilda.
Yeah, your good friend Julie Nathanson.
She really nailed it. I mean, you have to be. I think here you are noticing because of the voice acting, of course, because of
just how hurt she is.
Yeah, she's got a lot going on. There's a lot there.
Yeah, and there's no one better to play that than Julie. Like, Julie's a big psychology fan herself. So Drea, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
They can find me online on my website, drdreapsychology.com, or on social media, Arkham Asylum Doc.
You can find me. I am at bward028 on Twitter, at b_ward028 on Instagram. You can find us both at Arkham Sessions on Twitter and at the Arkham Sessions on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook, and follow our good friends over at Fanbase Press. We want to thank them for all of their support over the years. And we want to thank the patrons for making this possible at all. So thank you all very much. We hope you have a wonderful and safe and hopefully no incidents from Halloween, right? So,
yes.
so no visits from holiday. Happy Halloween, everyone.
And if you go to the same college as somebody, you're a suspect.
You're going to be a suspect. period. Don't wear the sweatshirt. Thanks, everybody. Happy Halloween from Brian Ward.
And Dr. Dre Letamendi.
We are
The Arkham Sessions.
Happy holiday.